Until Fallout 4, Bethesda's beloved post-apocalyptic RPG wasn't something that divided people. Both Fallout 3 and Obsidian's New Vegas went down very well, and despite being riddled with more than a few bugs and glitches, still amassed and maintained audiences in the hundreds of thousands. They proved that Bethesda's signature brand of game design can hop across genres and breathe life into something else other than Elder Scrolls. Yet, 7 years later, when they tried to do it again, we saw more than a mixed reaction. Now, there's nothing massively, categorically, or cripplingly wrong with Fallout 4, but there is a lot that skews left of center, a lot that feels off. Fallout 4 is still one hell of an achievement in pure game design, and all but the most respect to Bethesda for creating an action RPG that millions fell in love with. For me, though, there are a number of issues that I think prevent it from being remembered as fondly as its predecessors. I'm Scott from OurCulture.com, and this is 7 ways Bethesda should have made Fallout 4. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 7. The prologue pacing and introduction to the world. So, from the get-go, I was kind of on the back foot. The entire prologue felt rushed, going from hanging out with your partner to answering a door, a Vault-Tec employee mentioning a new shelter, and the bombs dropping seconds after. The scene where your partner is killed gets an appropriately passionate reaction, but following that, it's a quick, "I'll avenge you and I'll find our son" kind of line before you're blasting through radroaches and toddling off to do side missions. Being that your infant son is somewhere in the world all alone, or so you think, there's a distinct lack of drive behind your actions, especially in how little you're freaked out by your surroundings or worried about anything. Super mutants? Not a problem. Humanity being decimated or your own house being a pile of bricks? Nope, barely a thing. As a way for Bethesda to fast-track everything in service of getting on with the game, all dialogue is very lighthearted and immediately forthright when it comes to embarking on missions. You can choose to be more emotional when telling a handful of characters the details of your family, and suddenly you'll then trigger a very slow, very serious delivery as everything gets very sad. But then you're back to being chipper again. Way! It doesn't add up. Where were the options to scream Jack Bauer style, "What the hell's going on?" Even if you had to do unnecessary tasks to gain people's trust, the whole first few hours should have been centered on us grabbing someone by the collar and getting some real answers. Anything less, and it completely breaks the immersion. Number 6, make settlements matter. The more you look back on it, the entire idea of settlement building still feels incredibly strange. It pointed to an ideology at Bethesda HQ that the series could tap into a Minecraft-esque mentality, or one that reveled in PC modding entirely, giving you the tools to build and craft all sorts of items, weapons, and biggest of all, home bases. The issue was that you didn't need to. Many have argued that such an approach is entirely the point, and the reward that you get from creation is gratifying in itself, but I don't think that holds water, especially when it could have been so much more integral. Firstly, the only tutorial requires you repeatedly talking to Sturgis to get the most basic information. The UI is terrible, and for the finer points on how to build anything impressive, we all had to go looking online. In terms of integration, if you really dig through the menus, you can find out how to set up a nice little economy of traders, stockpiling items and caps for every time you return, but it's never integral to your progression outside of a couple of story missions, nor is it encouraged after the initial defense mission. Number 5, Story Part 1, the focus on Kellogg. Why was so much time spent literally getting into the mind of Kellogg and understanding his motivations? I can't tell you because it never matters in the long run. We find out that the guy who took our son had a tough upbringing on the way to discovering where he's hiding out, and that's it. Seriously, think about the structure of Fallout 4's narrative. You come out of the vault, track down Kellogg, learn where your son is through a bunch of memories, meet up with him, and choose a faction to side with. Roll credits. He makes up about a quarter of what you do in the entire game. Kellogg kills your partner, steals your kid, and is then revealed to be this potentially sympathetic figure drawn into a life of crime because of how detached he was from society itself. Were we supposed to do something with this information? It doesn't change how your son relates to you. There's no Stockholm Syndrome-esque implication that all the time spent with Kellogg actually made him into something of a father figure. Nothing. The most useful thing from Kellogg is his pistol, and although that could be a brilliant commentary on his arc as a character, we really needed more dialogue options assessing the supposed impact of him on our son, alongside some continuation of his placement in the narrative. Number 4, Story Part 2, Pacing and the Son Reveal. Even if you accept that your infant son is just going to fend for themselves, you'll then dart off and indulge in other missions and exploration. Somewhat fine, but come the point where you track him down and discover he's been an old man this entire time, there are even more hours where the story changes altogether, trying to get you invested in choosing between 4 different factions. Your goal up to this point has been to find your son, but the reveal that he's the head of the Institute comes with only the barest explanation. Reevaluating what you thought you knew about your purpose in this world, which was already poorly portrayed by your character just going along with everything, you now have to start siding with pivotal characters for the sake of an unknown upcoming event. The extended chunk of time after this reveal makes it feel like one elongated epilogue, but within that, multiple prompts rush to warn you of the dangers of siding with one person over the other. You're repeatedly told doing this will negate this and this, but the rationale of reasoning inherent to these decisions isn't there, being the preceding tens of hours were spent finding your son. There's not even an option to unite the factions, despite you being best buds with all their leaders, culminating in a forced decision that triggers a final battle and, for some factions, another catastrophic nuclear explosion. When your character chimes in with the standard war never changes shtick, it feels unearned. Like Bethesda thought, hey, if we just put this at the end, the fans will love it. Sorry, but you need to earn that phrase with a narrative that makes us feel the weight of committing to past errors all over again, especially if you're ultimately going to keep falling back on the idea of Fallout being a loop. Number 3, Story Part 3, do something impactful with all the slavery allegories. What does it mean to create life? How much sentience and anthropomorphic features does a given thing need to have before we can attribute human qualities to it? And does any of that matter if said creation isn't flesh and blood? Such questions are bandied about in Fallout 4 as it attempts to weave in what could have been a Blade Runner meets authoritarian politics theme, but wraps it up a little bit too conveniently in the end. See, back in 1857, a truly disgusting ruling from a retrospectively despised court case ruled that a free Negro of the African race is not a citizen within the meaning of the Constitution of the United States. This fundamentally wrong way of thinking is at the heart of many racial disputes, and is connoted throughout Fallout 4 as various characters talk about the indistinguishably humanoid synths not having the same rights as the rest of us, or just generally talking in a xenophobic manner. Whilst it would of course be disrespectful to compare a race to an AI construct in the real world, the idea of foreign entities living among us is a fear tactic you'll see on a nightly Fox News report. For a game to even tackle these themes should be applauded, but it's all handled with a detached Fallout-style sense of humor. You can choose from a menu at the close of the game where you stand on the matter no matter what, as opposed to facilitating something that only comes about based on many integral decisions or dialogue choices along the way. The idea that segregation could be a primal or human response and not necessarily a socio-political or cultural one is massive, yet only comes to the surface if you scoop it out yourself. Again, let Fallout's love of dialogue trees flesh out these mentalities amongst the townsfolk, and let you engage with a number of talking points along the way. Number 2, expand the dialogue system. Sarcasm? All of these aforementioned story-heavy fixes could only come to fruition if the dialogue system that we got was completely overhauled. Now, in theory, there should be no issue with voicing every response. I mean, it certainly didn't harm Mass Effect. But in reality, resigning you to 4 options represented by the barest of words just didn't work. The most shouted about negative is the omnipresent sarcasm, an adjective that could be positive, negative, humorous, or anything in between. Immediately, a fan-made PC mod was released that showed what your full sentences would be before you triggered them. A simple change that really should have been in since the beginning. Bethesda made it clear before launch that Fallout 4 had the biggest script they'd ever attempted, but clearly the majority of this was used on the surrounding world's NPCs, and not to flesh out our protagonist in a way that felt natural when interacting with them. We should have been able to question anything and everything, go in depth on Commonwealth politics, or skirt on through like the cap-trading wanderer we might have wanted to be instead. In essence and execution, we should have been able to roleplay. Number 1, it needed to be built from the ground up. Bethesda release a buggy game and the fallback is, well, they couldn't make it without these rough edges. They're trying their best. For Fallout to be this big and this intricate, it has to be like this. And I'm sorry, but if that's the case, maybe the overall experience should be trimmed back until it's manageable. For one, Skyrim held together better, and that was back in 2011. Then GTA 5 showcased a humongous world in 2013, still on the same hardware. Third, The Witcher 3 has just as many interlocking components and elements moving in unison, and its map is 10 square miles bigger. The idea of placing faith in this nebulous, unknown assumption of what Bethesda can or can't do reinforces the fact that they could make a better game just as much as the opposite. It comes to something when you can use Fallout 3's hacking cheats to get through the exact same minigames in the sequel, and for me, that went on to personify Fallout 4 entirely. It did feel like Fallout 3.5, a cobbled-together execution of cool elements that completely lack cohesion as a whole, not the market jump across generations that it should have been. Sadly, there's nothing here that you can sell Fallout 4 on that Fallout 3 and New Vegas didn't already nail, and that is the real issue.
Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Aren't you a star? Don't forget to subscribe below, and also the people who made this video, they're right here, so go and follow them and give them some love. If you want to see more content, there's probably some stuff flowing up above my head. Why not check it out? It could be fun. I'm not your dad.